representative of India.
Mr. President, India continues to remain concerned over the situation in Ukraine. The conflict has resulted in the loss of countless lives and misery, particularly for women, children, and the elderly, with millions becoming homeless and forced to seek shelter in neighboring countries. Reports of attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are also deeply concerning. We have consistently advocated that no solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. In this context, our Prime Minister's statement that this cannot be an era of war bears repetition. Escalation of hostilities and violence is in no one's interest. Instead, an urgent return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. Mr. President, India's approach to the Ukraine conflict will continue to be people-centric. We are providing both humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and economic support to some of our neighbors in the global south under economic distress, even as they stare at the escalating costs of food, of fuel, and fertilizers, which has been a consequential fallout of the ongoing conflict. Mr. President, the overall objective of today's resolution, seeking a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in line with the UN Charter, is understandable. We also note the emphasis on increasing support by member states for diplomatic efforts to achieve peace, as well as support for the Secretary General's efforts to promote a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. However, reports from the ground portray a complex scenario with the conflict intensifying on several fronts. Today, as the General Assembly marks a year of the Ukrainian conflict, it is important that we ask ourselves a few pertinent questions. Are we anywhere near a possible solution acceptable to both sides? Can any process that does not involve either of the two sides ever lead to a credible and meaningful solution? Has the UN system, and particularly its principal organ, the UN Security Council, based on a 1945 world construct, not been rendered ineffective to address contemporary challenges to global peace and security? Mr. President, India remains steadfastly committed to multilateralism and upholds the principles of the UN Charter. We will always call for dialogue and diplomacy as the only viable way out. While we take note of the stated objectives of today's resolution, given its inherent limitations in reaching our desired goal of securing lasting peace, we are constrained to abstain. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of India. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Pakistan has abstained on the draft resolution contained in document A/ES11/L7. I wish to explain the reasons for our vote. Pakistan is deeply concerned by the conflict in Ukraine, which has caused and is causing immense human suffering in Ukraine and massive damage to its infrastructure, economy, and society. We acknowledge the considerable effort made by the co-sponsors to moderate the tone and language of the draft resolution. Pakistan fully supports the resolution's call for respect for the principle of the sovereignty, sovereign equality, and territorial integrity of states, and non-acquisition of territory by the threat or use of force. States cannot be torn apart by the use of force. Pakistan regrets that these principles have not been universally applied and respected. For instance, in the situation of foreign occupation and the ongoing attempt at the illegal and forcible annexation of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan also endorses the resolution's call on member states and international organizations to redouble their support for diplomatic efforts to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. While the hostilities continue, there is an ever-present danger of a further military and geographical escalation of the war. There is thus an imminent threat to global peace and security. Mr. President, while my delegation agrees with and endorses the principles and general provisions contained in the draft resolution, there are some provisions which are not consistent with Pakistan's principled position on some of the elements covered in the resolution. As a country that has seen and suffered the consequences of prolonged conflict in our neighborhood, we attach highest priority to the immediate cessation of hostilities and the resumption of a dialogue to achieve a just and durable solution through direct or indirect negotiations, mediation, or other peaceful means. In this regard, we see an important role for the United Nations and the Secretary General, inter alia, under Chapter 6 and 8 of the UN Charter, for efforts aimed at de-escalation, renewed negotiations, and sustained dialogue for a peaceful diplomatic solution. Mr. President, consistent with our position on the draft resolution in document A/ES 11/L7, we have also abstained on the amendments proposed to the resolution by Belarus in documents A/ES 11/L8 and A/ES 11/L9. Mr. President, Pakistan continues to hope that in a constructive approach, the parties will soon accept a mutual and early cessation of hostilities. We also hope for the resumption of a dialogue for a durable resolution of the conflict based on the principles of the UN Charter and past agreements, and bearing in mind the legitimate security interests of all states. I thank you, Mr. President.
I call on the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am taking the floor today to say that India chooses this time not to respond to Pakistan's mischievous provocations. Our advice to the delegate of Pakistan is to refer to our numerous rights of reply that we have exercised in the past. Pakistan has only to look at itself and its own track record as a state that harbors and provides safe havens to terrorists and does so with impunity. Such uncalled for provocation is particularly regrettable and certainly misplaced at a time when, after 2 days of intense discussions, we have all agreed that the path of peace can be the only path forward to resolve conflict and discord. I thank you.
Thank you. I call on the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. In exercise of my right of reply, we would like to make the following points. India continues to perpetrate a factually incorrect position on this forum year after year. Jammu and Kashmir is an internationally recognized disputed territory and not an integral part of India, as it has been claimed. Repeating a wrong position would not make it acceptable at any point. The focus of today's debate is on people and on the crisis that we face at hand. And one of the inalienable rights of the people enshrined in the very first article of the Charter is the right of self-determination. In the case of Kashmiri people, the right to self-determination has been recognized and promised to them by the UN Security Council through its resolutions. For over 7 decades, India has prevented the Kashmiris, through force and fraud, from exercising this right and holding the UN-supervised plebiscite to enable the Kashmiris to determine their destiny. India has imprisoned the entire Kashmiri leadership, illegally detained thousands of Kashmiri youth, including women and children, summarily executed young boys, put down protests violently, and burnt down entire neighborhoods and villages. Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir remains the most militarized zone in the world, where close to 900,000 security forces have been deployed by India to curb the legitimate struggle of the Kashmiri people. But such measures only serve to intensify the struggle of the people of Jammu and Kashmir for the right to self-determination, even in the face of worst atrocities as evident from thousands of unknown, unmarked mass graves in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The innocent people of Jammu and Kashmir remain firm in their claim for their right to self-determination. Pakistan will keep exposing Indian brutalities and inform the international community of the plight of the Kashmiri people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.